The desert wind moved like a quiet judge through the Apache valley, lifting dust from the cracked earth and carrying whispers of old laws that had never learned mercy. Two women stood at the edge of the tribe's circle, their shadows long and thin in the dying light. Naya and Isha had already buried their husbands with their own hands, yet grief was not the end of their punishment. Among this tribe, a widowed woman was considered a burden, a bad omen that drained strength from warriors and invited hunger into the camps. The elders did not shout or curse. They spoke softly, which somehow made the verdict crueler. With stone faces, they declared that the women must leave before the sun rose again. No horses, no weapons, no protection, only the clothes they wore and the memories they could not escape. Around them, the tribe turned away. Mothers pulled children close. Warriors avoided their eyes. Tradition had spoken, and tradition never apologized. Naya clenched her jaw, holding back tears, while Isha's hands trembled as if the cold had already found her heart. They walked away together, not because they were brave, but because stopping would mean breaking. Behind them, the fires of the tribe flickered like dying stars, and ahead lay a land that swallowed the weak without leaving a trace. Night fell fast. Coyotes cried from the hills, and the moon painted the desert silver, revealing every danger and offering no comfort. The sisters moved slowly, feet blistered, throats dry, fear pressing down heavier than the sky. Naya remembered her husband's laugh, the way he promised protection, even in a world that rarely kept promises. Isha remembered warmth, children she never had, and a future that had been erased with one cruel decision. They did not speak much. Words felt useless against the vastness around them. Hours passed and exhaustion dragged at their bones. When Isha stumbled and fell to her knees, Naya knelt beside her, whispering that dawn would come, that something had to change. But hope sounded thin in the open desert. They did not know that unseen eyes were already watching from the ridge above, eyes sharpened by years of survival and regret. Ethan Cole, a lone cowboy with a weathered hat and a past he never discussed, had been riding late to avoid the heat. He had learned long ago that night revealed truths daylight tried to hide. From his vantage point, he saw two figures moving where no one should be traveling unguarded. He watched their unsteady steps, the way they leaned on each other, and something old and restless stirred in his chest. He had crossed paths with tribes before, knew their laws, and knew what it meant when women walked alone beyond the valley. Most men would have turned away. Trouble had a way of sticking to kindness in the West. But Ethan had buried his own family years ago, lost to violence that followed rules just as merciless as tribal law. He guided his horse down the slope, boots touching ground softly, hands open, to show he carried no threat. The women froze when they heard him. Fear flared instantly. Naya stepped forward despite her shaking legs, ready to protect Isha even if it meant death. Ethan stopped a few paces away, voice calm, respectful. He asked no questions at first. He simply offered water. Isha's eyes filled with tears as she drank, the cool relief almost painful. Only then did words come, broken and heavy, telling him they had been cast out, that returning meant death. Ethan listened without interruption. When the story ended, silence settled again, thick and uncomfortable. The cowboy looked back toward the distant fires of the tribe, then to the open land stretching endlessly west. He understood the weight of exile, the way it tried to convince you that you deserved it. He shook his head slowly, as if refusing to accept the world as it was. "Come with me," he said, the words simple but dangerous. In the West, promises were as risky as gunfights. Naya stared at him, suspicion battling desperation. Cowboys were not known for charity, and trust could get a woman killed faster than any blade. Ethan did not rush them. He told them about his ranch near the river, about the work, the quiet, the chance to live without someone deciding your worth by old wounds. He did not paint it as salvation. He described it as a choice. The wind carried his words gently, and for the first time since exile, the night did not feel entirely hostile. Isha looked at Naya, searching for strength. Naya closed her eyes briefly, thinking of the tribe that had turned away, of the desert that would claim them by morning. When she opened them, there was resolve instead of fear. They walked together toward Ethan's horse, every step feeling like crossing a line that could never be erased. Behind them, the valley remained silent, its judgment already past. Ahead lay uncertainty, danger, and a fragile hope carried by a stranger's courage. As they set off under the moon, none of them knew that this choice would challenge tribes, test loyalty, and awaken enemies who believed the old ways should never be questioned. But for now, survival was enough. And somewhere deep in the desert night, destiny had begun to move. Morning came slow and uncertain, the sun lifting itself over the plains like it, too, was tired of judging the living. Ethan's ranch appeared near the river as a rough outline of fences, cottonwood trees, and a small cabin that had learned to stand alone against wind and time. To Naya and Aisha, it looked less like a home and more like a test, one last chance offered by a land that usually took without giving. Ethan dismounted first, showing them how to approach the horses, where to rest, where water could be found. He spoke little, not from coldness but from respect. He knew that words could not erase exile. Only days of safety could do that. As the women drank and washed the dust from their faces, the river whispered, and the world felt briefly forgiving. Work began immediately. Survival on the frontier did not wait for healing. Naya proved strong and steady, learning the rhythm of the ranch with quiet focus. Isha, softer but sharp-eyed, learned the land, where snakes hid, how storms gathered, how to read the river's moods. At night, they sat near the fire, the silence no longer threatening. Ethan told them the truth of his past in pieces, a family taken by raiders, a ranch burned once before, the long road that taught him to trust actions more than oaths. The women listened, understanding grief in its many forms. In that shared understanding, a fragile bond formed, not ownership, not rescue, but alliance. Trouble came as it always did, uninvited. Riders appeared on the horizon one afternoon, dust trailing behind them like a warning. They were not bandits, not yet. They wore the markings of the Apache tribe. News had traveled fast. The elders had learned where the widows went, and pride burned hotter than mercy. Ethan watched from the fence line, jaw tight, mind clear. He told Naya and Aisha to stay inside the cabin, but Naya stepped forward, refusing to hide again. The riders stopped short, their leader speaking with authority, sharpened by tradition. He demanded the women's return, declaring the cowboy shelter an insult to the old laws. Ethan answered calmly, standing between the riders and the cabin. He did not insult the tribe. He challenged the idea that strength required cruelty. Words grew sharp, hands hovered near weapons. The river seemed to hold its breath. When the leader threatened blood, Naya stepped beside Ethan, her voice steady as stone. She spoke of loyalty repaid with exile, of a law that punished love and survival. Isha followed, trembling but unbroken, reminding them that a tribe that abandons its own bleeds from within. The riders hesitated. They had not expected defiance shaped by dignity. In the end, they left with warnings instead of violence, promising this was not over. Night fell heavy with consequence. Ethan knew the ranch would no longer be invisible. He prepared defenses, taught the women how to ride, how to shoot if needed, not to seek war, but to refuse helplessness. Days passed in tension, then weeks. Rumors drifted in with traders and travelers, divisions within the tribe, younger voices questioning the old laws, elders arguing behind closed fires. The West was changing slowly, painfully, and change always demanded a price. The final test came at dawn, not with guns, but with people. A small group arrived, women, children, and a few weary warriors seeking food, work, peace. The law had cracked, just enough to let humanity through. Ethan opened the gates. Naya and Isha welcomed them. No bitterness in their eyes, only resolve. The ranch grew, not as a fortress, but as a refuge built on choice rather than fear. As the sun climbed, Naya stood by the river, watching life move forward. Exile had not ended her story. It had redirected it. Isha laughed nearby, a sound that felt like victory. Ethan tipped his hat, knowing some battles were won without firing a single shot. In the Wild West, that was the rarest kind of triumph.